right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the PwC stage at VivaTech. I'm Jeanette Calandra. I'm PwC's Global Technology, Media, and Telecommunications Advisory Leader, and want to welcome you to today's conversation. I've been with the firm for many years and fortunate enough to spend 15 years out in Silicon Valley, so in the heart of disruption and unicorns. And one of the big takeaways for me having that experience is that unicorns and high growth company really have a different mindset to growth, and the things that are important and the priorities and the culture really is in its own league, I would say, versus some of the traditional organizations. So when we talk about profitable growth, I think it's going to be a great conversation of how do unicorns do that in today's macro environment. And I'm joined on stage today by two amazing fintech unicorns right here from France, but having global impact, as well as my colleague who also focuses on helping unicorns get profitable. So what I wanted to do as a quick introduction, if you could introduce yourself, your role, and what you are disrupting.
Hi, I'm Cyril Chiche. I'm co-founder and CEO at Lydia Solution, the company behind the Lydia app, but also now the Sumeria app. And well, we're trying to disrupt the consumer retail banking sector in France to start with, in Europe later.
Doing a great job of it.
And I'm Sebastian. I run the enterprise team at Ledger. So Ledger is a 10-year-old this year scale-up, also based in France. You're talking about the fact that we have global ambitions. France is actually a very small market for us, only about 3% of our revenue. We deliver in 165 countries. I think the only two countries where we don't ship is like North Korea and right now Russia for obvious reasons. We did do that before, but the past few years we haven't. I think that Ledger specifically, I'm not sure we're disrupting, but we're part of obviously a very big disruptive wave. We're trying to do something within the crypto wave, which is definitely disruptive. But what we're trying to do really is to help people secure their own assets. And as long as human beings have value that they need to secure and store, we want to provide that service for them. And we really believe in the fact that crypto is something that is a big disruption, a big revolution. It's a revolution of freedom, of self-sovereignty, and our role, just like you're talking about Silicon Valley and the gold rush, and this idea that within the gold rush it was people selling shovels and jeans and whatever that made the most money. We're part of like building the ecosystem that's really going to help crypto develop and really go into the next wave and kind of a more mature wave, which we're starting to see now.
Fantastic. Welcome.
Amazing. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is Vivek Srivastav. I am a partner with PwC US, and I work a lot with tech companies in the US who are looking for profitable growth. I actually spent past 3 to 4 years a lot working with the unicorns in the US that are specifically looking for scalability and profitability. Past 10 years, all of us have seen how growth has been led by unicorns, right? Lydia and Ledger of the world. But I think we are in a different world right now. A little bit volatile markets, global uncertainty. So we have to see next 3 to 5 years how they play out. We have some perspectives, and we want to share those perspectives with you today. Let's see how that goes.
All right, fantastic. So let's dive into it. Before we get to how do you pull the levers to drive profitable and sustainable growth, let's take perhaps a moment to talk about the fintech industry and the outlook as you see it. I might start with you first, Cyril. Lydia has been on an incredible journey, but that journey has been one of iterations. Started with, drink-on.me, you've moved to Lydia, you just announced a really big transformation this last month with the launch of Sumeria as well. Can you talk about, how are you seeing the industry overall, and what's causing you to iterate the way you're doing?
Well, I believe it's been an incredible 13 years since we launched the company. This year it's going to be the 10th anniversary of the FinTech Revolution, which is a French biggest FinTech event. And when we created that association 10 years ago, it was 17 companies in a conference room, and that was the ecosystem. Now there are more than 800 fintech companies in France alone, and I don't count the billions in fundraising, in revenue, and the thousands of recruitment and staff in these companies. So France is definitely now in continental Europe the biggest place for that, and I believe being part of that is also an incredible driving power for us to be always very agile, to keep on being frugal, to make sure that we don't lose that customer only mindset that is what you do when you start a company. And when you do that, the only way we know, there are many other ways, but we don't know how to make them work, is to iterate on very short cycles to make sure that you never get disconnected with your customers and how you can bring value to them, and only in this case will they bring value back to you. So iteration, you mentioned 3 of them. The truth is we ship a new version of the app every 2 weeks. So it's actually 26 of them every year.
You know, there are a couple of things that you said and earlier, Sebastian, that made me reflect a little bit. First, how long your companies have been in existence, right? Both a decade or more. And when I advise some of my more traditional economy company, global organizations, right, what I hear a lot is, well, you know, we started trying to innovate with this new product, and in 3 years they haven't made money yet. Right, and there's this sense from larger organizations that you could drive that innovation profitably in a very short time horizon, but when in fact, when we look at the unicorns of the world, this has been a journey, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Reddit just went public, and I think it was 16 or 17 years in. So you know, it does take time. I like what you were saying about the fact that you went from 17 to 800. I also love the fact, and I mean, we don't want to be too, we are in France, but it is really amazing to see, and I think a lot of different pieces were needed for that. But like in the crypto space, it's the same. Like Ledger is obviously like a global leader, but we also have SoRare, we have Sandbox, Artifact, all these companies that came in, and the whole crypto ecosystem in France, which is a bit of an extension of the finance. Do you count the crypto guys in your 800 or no?
I do.
Okay, cool. But I do love the fact that, you know, we have been able to like play this role, and we feel, because we were there before, kind of like you guys, one of the first ones in the ecosystem, that we have that responsibility to help the smaller companies. So we, you know, on top of being our own company and running our own company, we also have a fund, an investment fund that we do with Cathay. And with that investment fund, we invest in small startups that are going to help the ecosystem grow. So I also love this idea of saying that we're not just here to try to grow ourselves, we're trying to make the whole pie grow as a whole.
So Sebastian, maybe a follow-up question on that, right? We're in the middle of VivaTech, one of the global tech ecosystem conferences, and there's many others that happen, you know, annually. And a number of years back, right, blockchain and crypto was every part of the conversation. Gen AI and AI is now that new shiny toy. How does that affect how you go to market, especially on the enterprise front, where there's limited, you know, IT and technology budgets?
It's super interesting. So one of the things I was going to say about the space that we're in, and which makes it a bit more complicated when you're a startup. So in my past lives, I've worked for startups. Well, they were startups at the time, so mainly Amazon and Google, where you knew which market you were going after, right? When Amazon started, it was like, what percentage of book selling are we going to be able to move online, right? But the market exists. Same with Google. There were $500 billion spent in advertising. What percentage of that can Google take, right? And at the beginning, it was nothing. It was 0.1%. Well, now it's probably like 50. So anyway, with crypto, it's a little different because we're really, I mean, you could say that we're taking some of the financial markets, but it's not really that. It's really like a brand new ecosystem. And so we're very sensitive to how the market evolves, right? The book selling market and retail as a whole, yes, it goes up 1%, it goes down 1%. look at Bitcoin's prices, they go up 700%, then they go down, whatever. So it's much harder to, pilot, if you will, and that's one of the really big challenges that we have in the ecosystem. So one of the things that we're seeing, which is reassuring in some ways, is that the market is getting a bit more mature. So there are still swings, but they're not as wild. But that is one of the big challenges. Now, as to your questions on AI, I think that I see actually a lot of, so first of all, we use it as a tool. It's an amazing tool for us. So as a company, I just came out, the last meeting I was in right before that, we were discussing what we're doing there. And be it from the coding side, from customer service, et cetera, we're actually using it as an incredible tool. So we're loving that. And I think that there's going to be an increasing need for identification within that world, right? This week, we got our first call, a fake CEO call. So my CEO called me, but it wasn't him. I picked it up pretty quickly, but I mean...
On the phone?
Yes, on the phone, with a voice that sounded a little bit like him. Not fully, so that's why I know his voice well enough, but this is an iteration of today, what's going to happen, in 6 months. And so I think that the identification piece, which we can do through cryptography and through what we're doing with the ledger, like the idea that you'll be able to say to someone, this content I published and it was mine, or I'm calling you and here's the number that you can put in to make sure that it is actually indeed me, is going to be really important. So I think there's going to be crypto and AI are going to work really, really well together. And I think AI is going to need crypto a lot. And to you, and as to your last point, yes, for sure, a lot of the people that we used to talk to a year and a half ago that were, and actually I think it's coming a lot from the CEOs. So a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, especially in the traditional space, so I'm not talking about finance here, I'm talking more like corporates, CEOs would go into their innovation department and be like, what's our NFT strategy? What are we doing in crypto? Like, I want my metaverse strategy, right? And then everybody was scrambling trying to do something in NFTs. That got replaced by what's my AI strategy, for sure. But the direction of what crypto is and should be is still there. And I think that and in a lot of these companies, a lot of the people that really believe in what it can do to change their businesses are there. And crypto is everywhere already, right? In the supply chain, et cetera. I'm talking about blockchain more than crypto. So it's already revolutionizing a lot of things, and that's not going to go away. So I think they work well together. It is a challenge, but they work very well together.
No, thank you for that. So maybe I'll turn to you, Vivek, on the next question. As look, there was a long run, right, where everything was going great in the economy, and you didn't really have to think about the profitability. Now, with the macroeconomic environment we're in, with the higher interest rates, with the increased competition. Tell us, what are you seeing out there from conversations with unicorns, with the boardroom, with investors? What's changed?
That's a very good question, Jeanette. So, before I answer that question, let me talk about 30 seconds on the scale of it, right? If you really look at it, if you pick up top 100 unicorns of the world, so we are talking about here 2 trillion plus kind of valuations, right? That's the scale we are talking about. And I was looking 2 days back, I was looking into data. Top 100 unicorns, a lot of valuation is actually coming from fintech, right? So I think, and then I looked at data more. 5 years, 6 years back, we were talking about 40, 50 unicorns in fintech. And now, 6, 7 years later, now we are talking about 250 plus unicorns only in fintech. So it's huge. The scale is huge, right? But what's really happening is, because of all that macroeconomic pressures, the boardroom conversation is slightly changing. And there is a reason, right? If you look at last year, for example, the largest fintech in the world, all of us know about which one I'm talking about, they got a 50% down round, right? So because of the funding squeeze, the conversation is becoming more, to your point, Jeanette, is going in the direction of how do we improve our productivity, right? Because the question here is not really, unicorns have done it right. They did not really, they have different problems than large organizations. They don't have a lot of cost in, correct me if you guys disagree, a lot of cost in corporate functions, finance, HR, IT, legal, nobody cares. But you guys care about product development, customer success, sales and marketing. That's where the cost is. And the boardroom conversation, to your point, Jeanette, it's all about how can we make that more productive. If you cut it, your growth will go away. You can't cut it blindly. You need to make it more productive. That's where the conversation is.
So then,
I have a question.
Yeah.
When does a unicorn stop being a unicorn? When it's a decacorn? Because you were talking about the biggest finance unicorn, I guess, is Klarna. Is that what you were talking about?
That's a very good question. So I use multi-parameter approach. In this case, they are not IPO'd yet.
So as long as you have an IPO, you're still a unicorn?
So, yeah,
Got it.
IPO, yeah.
So then, talking about that balance, and Cyril, you shared with us a little bit of your strategy around cash. I think it was called respect the cash, right? I like that. I'm not too sure many of my startups do that, but respect the cash. But you really have had to balance, the growth story, the customer acquisition, the growing the revenue per customer, and global growth, striking that right balance. Can you share a little bit about, how do you do that? How do you prioritize, and how do you ensure that the path that you're going is going to drive you to profitability in line with the investor expectations?
Well, first of all, it was pretty easy for us to do that. And the past 2 years have been, I wouldn't say walk in the park because they've been everything but that, but they've been pretty easy to manage, and the boardroom conversation were pretty pleasant. First of all, because we were born 13 years ago in a country where there was no seed investment or almost none. And for 3 years, we built the company with our own cash. We don't have any. So you got to respect the cash, especially when you don't have any. That's one. And when you do that for 3 years, normally it's part of the culture, and you're going to keep on doing that. So we missed a lot of KPIs and objectives that we put in the, in the business model or in the business plan when we raised fund. But there's one we never missed in 13 years. It's the cash at the end of the year. This one we overperform every single year, no matter what. Why? Because we drive the company by the cash. If we don't make the cash, we spend less the next month. If we make the cash, we spend more. So the idea is really that if you drive the company by the cash, it's much easier to be in good shape when, finding cash is difficult. When there is cash available, you're, as a CEO, you're paid to seize opportunities. HR, acquisition, technology, financing, it's all the same. It's all opportunities, and you should seize them. Even if you don't need it, you should seize them. It's an opportunity. You'll find what you're going to be doing with it later on. It's not a problem. The way we did it is really, we believe in one thing, is that big industries, especially old and strong and profitable industries like banks, don't get disrupted easily. You can see that most people still bank with 200 years old institution, even across the age groups. But the disruption never comes from what you offer and the offering model. It always comes from the cost model. So if you can change the cost structure, then what you can offer is disrupting, and then you can play. Because if you play with if you look at banking and what people call digital banking, most of it is a bank with a digital interface on top. So it's the cost structure of a bank plus the cost structure of digital on top. Of course, you're not going to become a digital bank by doing this. Digital bank is like a digital anything. It's a digital company that does operate in banking. So for example, when we announced Sumeria last week, we announced that for the first time in France, although it's legally feasible since 20 years, nobody done it, no French bank, we're going to pay interest 4% on deposit, on the daily account, on your cash account. And that is something that people come to us, journalists, all kind of experts, say, why didn't bank do it? Say, ask them. How are you going to do it? Well, it's easy. We're going to share what we get on these deposits with the customers. And since we start with almost zero, well, anything we get is more than if we didn't share and get nothing. So it's pretty straightforward. But if you can't, you can't have that if your cost structure is huge. You have to be very frugal, and I believe we are.
Yeah, great story.
I want to echo what Cyril is saying, because I think it's very true, and I think it's true for any startups. And what's also true is that the ones that fail is because they didn't manage their cash right, for
they
sure.
Didn't respect the cash.
Exactly. And we've seen, I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that from you. But but it's true, and we've seen it in our space a lot. And people that we were talking with that were potential partners or even potential acquisitions, and that ended up going under just because they ran out of cash. That happens a lot. If you're in a bear market where it's very hard to raise, and in crypto, obviously, like the past year, we were able to, but miraculously in some ways, and thank God to our CEO for doing that. But most companies failed because they couldn't raise cash. So respecting the cash for sure is like the number one thing, and that's we're doing exactly the same way you are. And the challenge that it creates is, but which I see as actually something very positive, is that it forces you to be very selective as to where you're going to put your resources, right? So I think it's, at one point or another, especially when you're in nascent markets, the opportunities are very, very large, right? There are many things that you can go after. And when you have a lot of cash, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You're kind of like, you see all the lights and you try to go. But at one point or another, these hard moments where you need to manage the cash force you to sit down and say, okay, I'm only going to do 3 things. And this idea of saying that you could only have 3 priorities, if you have like 10 priorities, it's like having none. It forces you to do that exercise. So we did that at the beginning of the bear market, which was about 1.5 years ago. And even though things are much better today than they were 18 months ago, those principles that we've created at that moment are still the principles by which we're driving the company. We've defined, I said 3, it's actually 6, but like 3 of them are kind of cross the business. But they're still the way, those principles that we're going after. When we do QBRs, that's what we're looking at. Every year when we're like working on our plans, that we're looking at as well. And what I find very interesting, and my CFO, who could be speaking instead of me right now on that specific topic, and what he's doing incredibly well is that even when things get better, is to bring it back down and not just say, and that's one of the things, right after, I would say, when things around March, right, like the Bitcoin prices started going up, etc. There was an event in Denver, which is ETH Denver, and it was the first kind of event that happened. Well, actually, no. Let me tell another story. In January, when the ETFs got approved, I was at an event in St. Moritz with 200 CEOs of crypto companies and traditional finance companies, and you would have thought that when that happened, it would have been like, champagne, it's so great, we're so happy, it changes everything, the bull market's coming. Nothing. Number one, because people expected it to happen, but number two, because they realized that it doesn't mean anything. It's obviously a good first step, but we need to keep our head down and keep building the ecosystem. And the risk is to lose it again, and bubbles exist everywhere. I went through the dot-com bubble in 2000, and I was at Amazon at the time, right? And bubbles happen all the time. That's just the nature of the game in tech. You just need to keep your head down, for sure.
You look much younger.
Thank you. I was 12. I was 12 years old.
All right.
Started early.
I'm going to give a heads up to the audience that we're going to come to you for questions in 2 minutes or less. But let's one lever we haven't talked about is the importance of partnerships when it comes to growth and doing it within the cost boundaries that you've set. I know that Ledger has partnered with MoonPay and Coinbase, and I just learned a little bit today some of the great stuff that PwC and Ledger are doing. So can you talk a little bit about how partnerships play a role? And Cyril, it'd be good to get your take on that too, but you got to go 60 seconds or less because we got to get to Q&A.
If you want to talk more about it, you can talk to Julie, who's in the first row, who's our head of partnerships. She'll explain to you everything that she does. No, but to me, it's taking different strengths that we have and like putting them together. So obviously, like if I want to talk about PwC, since we're here, you guys have been around, and your power, etc. Obviously outweighs ours, and a lot of the things that you do, we actually need, and there's no way that we would be able to build it. So leveraging ours, and we have innovation strength in crypto that you guys don't have and we want to have either. So to me, it's the perfect example of working together, like leveraging each other's strength. So that's what it's about for me.
Great. Cyril, how does Lydia think about partnerships in the fintech space?
Well, it's impossible to build something like what we're building alone. So, every time you want to do something, you have really, if you're obsessed by what you're going to be delivering to your customer, you have to find the exact best partner for that very thing. So in the end, you end up managing a very complex ecosystem of partners that are the different bricks that nobody sees, nobody knows about, and you have to manage, orchestrate, but also have very strategic relationships with these companies to, in the end, be the front player that people see. It's like, you know, these Formula One team. You only see the drivers, but in it's 1,000 people working in the back. Some just in the garage, you see them during the race, but a lot more in the factory. And all these people have to be perfectly in sync to make it happen. And I believe building from scratch an online bank is exactly like building this Formula One team, and happy to be in the car for an hour or 45 minutes, but it's just a very small part of the entire process. And what we built is really built on partnerships, and many of them from companies around the world in many sectors.
We don't want to talk about how long I was in the car yesterday trying to get into Paris from the airport. So you're bringing up, I'm having a little
I would love to talk about that, but we're going to be getting in trouble.
All right, so we're going to open it up to Q&A from the crowd. We got a mic that we're going to pass around.
Working? Yeah. Two questions, in fact, two axes. First, do you use open source technology in your story, and how do you manage the fact that you are in a regulation organization? I mean, you are in a regulation market. A bank and crypto money is quite regulation, so it's difficult, like a startup, to work with this. That's maybe tough.
So. Open source, absolutely. Not 100% of what we do, but most of what we do, and we're pushing for that a lot, because the idea is we're building a platform, so a platform needs to be open source for people to take advantage of it, so that's really in our DNA. Regulation, yes, we talk about, because you have an existing regulation, we have like a moving regulation. So, you know, I was just talking about what's happening in the UK, for example, right now, and I don't know if it's linked to Brexit or to different positions. Sometimes you get one good news, like we're hearing that maybe at 4 p.m. today in the US, the ETH ETF is going to be approved. We don't know if it's going to be the case or not, but it looks like it's going to be. That's good news, regulation-wise, coming from the US. But last week, I had like terrible news coming out of the UK. So we need to, and our market is global. So you need to adapt everything to every market. So it is super complex. But thank God we have amazing people working on the regulation team at Ledger. So that's helping me sleep at night.
And for us, of course, the answer is yes on the first question. On the second question, we're very unusual and quite unique in the fact that we love regulation. Yeah, I'm going to explain to you why we love regulation. Regulation is a framework, right? So if you get it right and you don't come from the industry, you're not an expert, it tells you precisely what you can and what you can't do. So it's much more easier to actually build when you know the framework. It's like a puzzle. You know, when you know what it's going to look like when you got the corner pieces, then it's easier to build. That's one. Number two, if you look at the last 15 years when we've been operating more or less, the regulation has been constantly, at least at European level, pushing for more technology, more competition, more access to data with more security. So stuff that as a citizen, but also as a fintech, as a disrupting company, has been not only helpful, but instrumental, critical for us to exist. We wouldn't be here if it wouldn't been for these changes in regulation. So yeah.
You need to build on something that's existing and that's strong, right? Like, and then for sure, like we feel that regulation hurts us in some ways, but we also know that it's something that's needed to be able to develop, to build on something strong.
Hey, any other questions from the audience? Well, maybe then I'll ask one closing, right? So this could be a lesson learned or a piece of advice, but it could either be for other unicorns or existing large-scale organizations. What would you offer to ensure that they are either disrupting or that they're not disrupted? Was that too complicated?
Do you have 5 hours?
Short piece of advice. This wasn't in the script, so okay,
but
we've
it's
got
great.
to stop, so we got to be quick here.
So I mean, I'm thinking that, and then I'll go back to what I was discussing earlier, just to rush but slowly, to like take your time in making the right decisions. I think that in the unicorn world, it's scaling is the name of the game, and you want to do it as fast as possible, but you need to do it fast, but with the right processes in place. I think that some of the mistakes that we've made is at times because we went too quickly, or maybe we didn't have the right processes in place. So I think that, you know, to really take the time, you know, this idea of, I think it was Washington or something that said that, you know, if you had like an hour to cut down a tree, what would you do? You'd spend like 59 minutes sharpening his axe. That's kind of like the idea, right? Like make sure you take your time to sharpen your axe before you take a swing.
I'm going to put that as a takeaway to thoughtfully hustle. How's that?
I like that. I like that.
All right, Cyril?
Honestly, iterate, and don't be afraid that 99 times out of 100, you're going to fail. And I mean, failing is part of the learning, and it's part of the journey. And since we don't know the destination, we better enjoy the journey. So.
All right, learn from your failures. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the time today. This was a fantastic conversation. We'll be just off the stage here if you have any more questions to ask. Thank you.